Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back to Bitcoin and Beyond. I am Melanie Carstens, and today we are joined by Hermann Buhr. He is the founder of Surf Kids, Bitcoin Ekasi. He is based in Mossel Bay in South Africa, and he's been involved in Bitcoin since 2013. So I think some amazing stories to tell us. Hermann, welcome.
How's it? Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Oh, am I freezing? We just were talking about technical issues before, and I think I might be freezing.
Looks okay my side.
Okay, but we'll see how we go. No, I don't know what is going on with this thing. Well, we're on live, so just see how it goes.
We're back.
We are back, and let's see how it goes. I don't know. I've been using Restream for like a year, and it's been the most amazing thing in the world. And all of a sudden, it's been a bit dodgy. So fingers crossed we last. Okay, so welcome. I met Hermann a couple of weeks ago at Adopting Bitcoin Cape Town, which is something he's also a founder of. So we'll dive into that a little bit later as well. But I think I want to start off where I start with all the guests on my show and ask you to tell your Bitcoin story. Where did it all start for you?
It was totally random. I've got a pretty good friend of mine. We don't see each other that often anymore, but we used to work together, and we're still in touch. He gave me a copy of Bitcoin magazine way back in 2013, around June, and he figured I'd be interested in it. Both of us are kind of like very anti-establishment type people, so we connect on that level. And he told me, "Well, I think you'll be interested in this," and he gave me a copy. I read it, and yeah, it was obviously just fascinating as a concept. I'd been aware of the issues in money since obviously 2008. Well, not obvious, but I mean 2008 was the sort of the big awakening for me, with all the shenanigans that were going on in the financial system. I was at university then, and then obviously being at university and being very curious about everything, wanting to understand how things work, when the financial crisis happened, I sort of dove into the root causes of this insane system that just allows for endless debt. So that was basically where it started. It was around the same time that there were issues in Cyprus with confiscations, and I had an indirect connection with that, and it just seemed entirely unfair that a centralized bureaucracy could just decide to confiscate.
That is the craziest story. I was in Cyprus last year, and I'd never heard of this story, weirdly enough, before. And driving around Cyprus, it's actually it's all these years later.
Yeah, it's a crazy story. People that basically got given shares in a bankrupt business, which is a bank, in exchange for deposits. So it's like you're being forced to buy a bankrupt business so that the business can bail itself out. It's just so those two things happen at the same time. And then obviously reading through that Bitcoin magazine, I realized that if the people had their money in Bitcoin, this would not have been possible. But I didn't understand it immediately. It took a long time before I wrapped my head around what it really is and what it isn't, and what it's good for and what it's not good for, and how to use it and how it works. Especially, I'm still breaking my head on the technical side of things. So.
And that's always going to be, right? Every 5 minutes, just when you think you've kind of like wrapped your head around it, it kind of changes up again now. I'm interested also, maybe we can touch on, I don't know what your thoughts are, but just in how it's becoming kind of this potential currency for sort of agentic web, you know. So I think it's always going to have fascinating growth and use cases. So, okay, so that's where it all started for you, this magazine 2013. I want to just go back a little bit to the sort of, just to, because I think it leads beautifully into, you know, where you are now and what Bitcoin Ekasi is. But did you grow up in Mossel Bay? Are you born and bred in Mossel Bay, or was that something you sort of found along your journey as well? Because you're involved in travel outside of,
Yeah.
or previously to.
Yeah, my wife still runs the tour operator. So I'm a co-owner, and I mean we started the business together, so we still work together. Although I don't spend too much time on the travel business anymore. But with her, we were, you know, involved in and still are involved in the tourism industry. Going on 15 years now. We started the business in 2010. Mossel Bay. Why Mossel Bay? I mean, I grew up in Cape Town, so I'm not from around here. But my family always used to go on holiday in this part of the world when I was a kid. It's sort of the closest place to Cape Town that you can get warm ocean water if you want to go on a December holiday, you know. And so it was a very popular thing to do. Even though I grew up on the beach, so we lived on the west coast. The ocean was cold, and my parents and my family wanted warm ocean for that 2-3 week December holiday period. So we'd always come on holiday here. So I knew the area quite well before moving here. But yeah, Cape Town. I mean, Cape Town is awesome. It's, as far as cities go, it's definitely one of the most beautiful cities out there. Obviously it has its problems, but you know, it's incredible with that. I mean, everybody that goes to Cape Town for the first time is just blown away by the proximity of the mountain and the ocean, and that sort of amphitheater type feeling that you get when you're standing on the edge of the city bowl. You know, when you take that drive around Signal Hill, and you look out over the waterfront and the city bowl and and against the backdrop of Table Mountain, it's just, I mean, I've traveled far and wide, and I don't think I've seen anything else like that ever before. So
I agree.
So but I left Cape Town just because like big city life is not really for me. I don't know, maybe it's the traffic. I just too many people just get on my nerves. So yeah.
I feel you. Yeah, your name, I mean, I think you kind of signal it with your pseudonym or the name that you use online, Frey fucking O. For the Americans watching, what does Frey fucking O mean and why? I suppose because that's interesting. I mean, you've obviously, like you said, you know, the ethos, when you saw it in 2013, you kind of, so this Frey fucking O, this sounds like it's been somebody that's been inside you forever.
The name is actually from a play, a drama production that my mother was involved with, and when I was a teenager.
No ways, really?
Yeah, she's she had a long most of my siblings and my mother is involved in the arts, drama, stage production. Two of my sisters are, you know, doing quite well in the film and TV industry. They used to be in South Africa. They're not anymore. They emigrated, but before they left here, they did quite well locally. Very well, actually. But anyway, my mom was involved in drama, stage productions, and she did this play when I was a teenager. And so the name is from that play. It's not directly from the play, but it was sort of inspired by this one line. I think it's a play by Antjie Krog. It's quite a famous South African playwright. And at some point in the play, the protagonist, or one of the protagonists, says, I'm a vrij fucking vrou. And I listened to that. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I can kind of identify with that. Freedom to me is ultimately what it's all about. So it's not about Bitcoin really. At the end of the day, it's about freedom, and Bitcoin is one way to get there. But there's many other ways in which one can pursue freedom. Bitcoin's not the be all and end all of that. So yeah, it predates Bitcoin, that's for sure.
Yeah. And it means free, FUCKING, man. That's what it means for anybody who doesn't understand Afrikaans. I've been saying I was on a news show last year for the year, and I eventually got everybody used to say, let's go. And by the end of it, everybody was saying, kom ons gaan. So we're slowly introducing the taal across the ocean.
Yeah.
So sort of you obviously got into the travel industry, and then it started with Surf Kids. Is that right?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, we started the Surf Kids nonprofit and the business at the same time. And the Surf Kids was just a side project. So we had the tour operator on the one side that was a profit generating business, getting overseas tourists to come to South Africa specifically for surfing. And we had this little nonprofit on the side, which was very much a part-time sort of side project, but it started growing. And over the years, I started focusing more on the nonprofit side of things, whereas my wife was more focused on the business side of things, although I would always be involved with the business, until 2021, which is when we started the Bitcoin Ekasi project as an extension of the nonprofit. But it was actually through the business that I first started using Bitcoin on a regular basis. We started accepting payments in Bitcoin to work around sanctions beginning in 2015. So that's when I really sort of, the light bulb went off with just how powerful this would be for a world where, freedom is not a given. So being cut off by sanctions, and then being totally unable to receive or make payments, and then the next thing you're able to do whatever the hell you want, because you're using a technology that's effectively unstoppable if you use it at the protocol level anyway. So yeah, that's actually, it's through the business. But then later on, I figured that if we're going to do something to drive adoption, then this project that we built on top of the Surfer Kids would be a great vehicle for that, because it would attract attention, and in that way become an educational proof of concept type thing where people could look at what we're building and go, okay, so that's kind of the whole point of what we're trying to do here. Obviously, it benefits the people in the community itself immensely, but for external observers, it's a great window into what it is that we're trying to work towards as Bitcoin. Like what is it that Bitcoin is trying to become? So it's trying to become this global money, and it's kind of like a microscopic example of that.
Okay, so there were Surfer Kids. Did Bitcoin Ekasi happen? Because the way I understand it is the salaries, that's sort of how it started, is the salaries that are paid for the folk who work with you and Surfer Kids are paid in Bitcoin. Is that kind of, how did that kind of progress? Because there's you've got Surfer Kids, you've got Bitcoin Ekasi, which is the circular economy, which we can get into just now. Did it happen because the circular economy happen first, and then you thought, oh, okay, we can pay this? Or did it actually kind of happen to support the Surfer Kids, if that makes sense? Like, did you have people working at Surfer Kids before earning fiat? Is kind of what I'm going.
Yeah. We had coaches at Surfer Kids earning fiat. We had a small we had a small team of people working for the nonprofit, including myself. It was 4 people, so it's a very small team. And we transitioned some of those salaries slowly but surely from fiat to Bitcoin, starting in 2021. And I think by the time we got to the end of 2022, we were no longer paying any salaries in fiat. So the whole team, and the team had also grown a little by then, because we had started doing Bitcoin education in addition to the regular surf lessons that we were giving to the township kids. So we were starting to do Bitcoin education as well. So the team had grown a little bit. But yeah, by the end of 2022, we weren't paying any salaries in fiat. So between middle 2021, right?
Yeah, we are live. I checked on Twitter, so I can see us live. I don't know. I've been using this, like I said, for a year and a half, and this has never happened. I don't know. I'm gonna try and actually find something new to use.
No worries.
But now I don't know if, okay, there we are. I think it should be going live out. I just want to check that it is. This is so frustrating. I really should probably start recording, because I can not have all these issues. Yeah. So you were saying.
What was I saying? I think I was saying, yeah, we basically transitioned the salaries from fiat to Bitcoin. And it just kind of, I mean, there was a lot of things that happened that contributed to that. It wasn't just one single thing, but the story of Bitcoin Beach in El Salvador played a big role in our decision to do that. I had been writing for Bitcoin magazine by that stage, so I'd written a few articles in the magazine, and some of it was quite well received. And I'd done 1 or 2 podcasts where we were talking about Bitcoin, and somehow in one of these podcasts I spoke about this charity, and I mentioned that we might want to do something like Bitcoin Beach. Who knows? We'll see. And then somebody donated some Bitcoin to the charity. And so the charity had this little small Bitcoin treasury, very small, nothing significant, but we figured, okay, well, now that we have something to work with, we might as well just, dive right in and start. And so I had also been talking to the coaches about Bitcoin for some time, because they'd been approached by a person selling a scam, and so I had to explain to them what Bitcoin is and what it isn't. Otherwise, they probably would have fallen for the scam.
Yeah.
So it was all those things that were sort of contributing factors. And then, kind of beginning in August 2021, we jumped in and we said, okay, we found a shop that was willing to take payment in Bitcoin in the township. And we started paying one of the coaches a small part of the salary in Bitcoin. And then from there, just kind of evolved and grew.
And I mean, you've obviously, like you said, you've transitioned quite over. And I mean, I think before I want to go back and just sort of talk about what that is and how it works. But I just curiously, how was it received? I mean, how difficult or easy was it to explain, what Bitcoin was and how? Because this is, for those who don't know, Mossel Bay is a very small town on the East Coast garden route.
Yeah, sort of on the southern.
I know where it is. Yes,
it's more south than east.
Yes.
But yeah,
I've actually got family there, so it's not like I don't know where it is. I just get confused because there's the West Coast. I come from the East Coast, which is the actual East Coast of Africa.
Yeah.
So anyway, so this is a small town, and not only that, this is a township within the town of sort of, a rural area. So you're really talking about like starting from scratch, right? So how was that received, and how easy was it to kind of to go with this flow, and then to obviously onboard, to create this circular economy, to onboard the retailers and so on, or the vendors?
I mean, it was relatively, it was challenging, obviously. It was very challenging, but it's interesting when people have immediate problems to solve, then they are more receptive to potential solutions. And so there is the obvious problem in South Africa of banking access being not severely limited, but it's not exactly straightforward to walk into a bank and open a bank account if you don't have a proof of address. So if you live in a shack and you cannot prove where you live, for example, it's not straightforward to open a bank account. So the idea that you can move money from one place to another without having to worry about access was quite appealing. You know, you could buy phone credits relatively very easily compared to before. You know, there's lots of things that you can't do with cash. You know, so you can't make transactions from home, and if it's pissing with rain outside, you got to walk to the nearest corner store to buy something if all you have is cash. Whereas if you have digital money on your phone, there's a lot of things that you can do that is way more convenient. So, you know, for a community that is largely cash based, where access to banking is still pretty limited, not completely unheard of, but it is difficult. For a community like that, you know, this easy access to digital money was quite appealing. It was not exactly impossible. It was easier to onboard them than a lot of my friends and family. Way easier.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question, because I'm just like, years in, I think I must have been, you know, and I mean, I talk about it passionately, and I can count with my hand how many people kind of are, you know, wow, that's interesting. You know, it's easier for me to get my son and his friends to do it, you know, and they're 13.
Yeah, well, I mean, if people don't have a problem, then they're not going to be interested in the solution.
Yeah.
So, and that's true no matter what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So if they don't see, I mean, even if they have the problem but they don't see the problem, like at the end of the day, we all have the problem. We all live in the system that is not quite fair, but not everybody sees the problem. And if you don't see the problem, then you're not going to be interested in the solution. But for some people, that problem is just more obvious. It's literally staring them in the face every single day. And so for them, the solution is so much more attractive.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like people have got so many problems, you know, and I find one of the things I've realized actually is when you start talking to money about people and you make them feel like they actually don't know what's going on with their money, and then this new kind of money, it's almost like this weird, like, they don't want to go there, you know. And I think, what do you think about sort of comparatively? I mean, you've got most of this is kind of an international, you know, it comes from the States, the biggest news that we hear, and, you know, it's very much States driven, but it's a very different experience. Bitcoin in South Africa feels to me like it's a very different experience than it is to, because you're not, you know, people sort of, how can I say it? It's not like this big hodl culture with what you're doing. You know, this is a day to day. I need my money today, and I need to spend it either today or tomorrow.
I mean, ultimately, we are working our way towards motivating people to save. Like
Yeah.
the end goal is freedom, and Bitcoin is a tool to get there. And probably at least as important as the movement of money is the storage of value. And so, you know, you're never going to be free if you don't accumulate capital that your future self can then fall back on.
Yeah.
You know, you're never going to be free if you're hoping that a bankrupt government is going to be there one day to you know, to look after you when you need it. And so, yeah, it's not about hodling, but it is about saving. It's just that we're getting people to develop a savings mindset or a stacking sats mindset by introducing this new thing to them through spending. So that's how they learn to trust the system.
Yeah.
And
Sorry.
no, I was going to say it is different. It is very different. But I think the feeling I got from visiting the Las Vegas conference last year. It's just that there's no comparison between the number of companies that are building Bitcoin related products and services, and the States is just on a whole other level. But then if you look at the number of merchants that accept Bitcoin as payment, despite the fact that our population in South Africa is 5 times smaller, we have a comparative number of businesses that accept Bitcoin as payment. And so that tells me that as a medium of exchange, it's being used more on a daily basis here. Maybe it's being talked about more in the US, and there's obviously way more value and volume there, clearly. But in terms of the relative number of people that are using it day to day, I think South Africa is one of the most exciting places to be. I mean, Blink is one of the most popular spending wallets globally, and South Africa is second only to El Salvador in terms of the number of active users that actually use the wallet on a day-to-day basis.
Wild. That is wild.
Yeah, so I think it's a very exciting place to be. It's just that you don't have the same attention here, but what's happening here is kind of like it's not so obvious.
That's what I find so interesting. If you just sort of pull back a bit and you think about how many available problems we've got to solve here with this incredible, I don't know what, I don't want to call it money, but this incredible, units of exchange, store of value with Bitcoin. We've got so much to solve here. And yet it seems like the same sort of things are being built over and over and over again in places that not necessarily have as many problems or as many needs for solutions as we do, And I would say now that you've told me about Blink, I can understand that. I can understand why. Because just like you said, as simple as sending money, the idea that not everybody in this country has a bank account is foreign to a lot of people overseas, because it just seems like something you just have. Everybody's got one, Yeah,
or the idea that you have a bank account, but then once a month you go to your nearest ATM, you stand in a queue for an hour, and you withdraw everything you can from the bank account, and you live off of cash for the rest of the month until you receive your next paycheck at the end of the following month. And so effectively, the only thing that you're doing with your bank account is receiving your paycheck and withdrawing the paycheck in its entirety. And then you're living off of cash. That is also a pretty foreign concept to people in more developed countries. And yet that's what happens here.
Let's talk about why that is. I mean, why don't people walk around tapping their cards?
I think there's a number of causes. I think banking is relatively expensive in South Africa. It's, there are ways to lower your fees. Obviously, that some of the banks have done quite a lot there, but it's still relatively expensive. And I think that comes down to South Africa having to submit itself to the same global regulatory bodies as any other country. So our banking costs is comparable to a country like Germany, but obviously our average income is nowhere near the same as it is there. And that's simply because our banks have to meet the same obligations, and so relative to the average income, banking costs become more expensive. But I also think it's because there's companies that issue predatory loans that people don't understand, and then they'd rather withdraw the money out of the bank account so that the debit orders can't go off at the end of the month, because they sign up for buy now, pay later things that they don't understand, and they don't read the fine print, and they They think they should be done paying after a year, but then actually there's another 2 years of interest payments left, or whatever the case may be. That probably contributes as well. So I don't know. It's a variety of factors. I'm certainly not an expert in that field, but it's just, the fact is that it is what it is. You know, people, even people who have bank accounts don't use them.
I know. I did even for myself, my bank account, if you look at it, costs, it's a spousal account, and it's 235 Rand a month. So if my husband or I earned 500 Rand a month, I would only earn 250 Rand a month if I put it in the bank. It's the most weirdest. And the more you understand, because I actually, to be honest with you, until sort of 6 years ago, when I got sort of heavily interested and involved to a degree with Bitcoin, I didn't also think about money. It was just something that I got and I needed and I used, and that was the end of it. And I think that is the beautiful thing as well about Bitcoin, is that it forces you to actually think about what money is and how manipulated we've been in this system, how trapped we are by it.
Yeah, no, it
Even
does.
just
I
the
mean,
banking system is becomes ludicrous when you start thinking about it.
yeah, I mean, I think it's useful if you think about what money is first, and you learn to understand, or you learn something about the problem, and then you stumble across the solution, which could be Bitcoin. I can see why a lot of people are turned off by Bitcoin, because they present it with a solution long before they are ready to look at the problem. Because Bitcoin did not emerge from a vacuum. Obviously, it's quite clearly, the way that Satoshi presented it to the world, or to the small community that he presented it to, because it didn't attract that much attention in the beginning. But the way he presented it to that little community in the beginning was that, look, obviously this is in response to the insanity of 2008. And so, yeah, I think the whole question around what is money and where does it come from and who controls it and who gets to print it and who doesn't get to print it, and why are banks allowed to lend it into existence, etc., etc., etc. Like, those questions are probably more important than asking yourself what is Bitcoin, because
You're so on the money. So on the money. That is spot on. When you start, just a simple thing for me, someone said to me, my brother actually said to me, do you know how when they say money's printed, do you know what that means? For me, I'm thinking of like a machine in a building going, and it's nothing like that. It's just basically like, okay, we'll just write a number on a piece of paper. Oh, look, now you got to pay it back. It's.
Yeah.
And
well,
so that
it used to be that.
say.
It used to be paper. Yeah.
Yeah, we used to have a machine. We used to have gold bars. We used to have a lot of things. So it just kind of fell out the window.
I mean, I think it's useful to. I'm also not an expert in that field, but I do know a little bit about it. I think it's useful to also, start with, rather than start with the current problem, maybe to look at the historical problems with money. Like, what is it? Where did things go wrong in the past? Because I think it's easier to explain, like, rather than try and explain how money creation works today, because it is a very complicated system. It's not as straightforward as the central bank printing money. That's not quite how it works. But if you look at historical examples, for example, where they would dilute the emperors or kings or whoever controlled the issuance of metal coins back in the day would dilute the precious metal content, and so they would issue a standardized coin which has a certain value, and as those coins get circulated, they would melt that down, mix it with cheaper metals, and so they would effectively turn 1,000 coins into 1,500 coins. So they're effectively also creating money out of thin air. Not exactly out of thin air, but
Yeah. It's the
they
principle. I
are.
mean,
Yeah. I think it's easier to understand those types of examples than it is to understand what's going on today. So I think it's useful to sometimes try and start with that conversation rather than to start with modern monetary policy conversations.
just feels like it's been built in from the beginning that it's a mess. It feels like it just started off. I mean, maybe far back in the day, it was a good thing. But, every time somebody tells me a new story about money or its origins or its history, it's
I
very
mean,
rarely an optimistic story.
I think everything that has anything to do with human nature is a mess, because human nature is a messy thing. Like we
Yeah.
are very, very how can I say it? Imperfect is a
Yeah.
euphemistic way of putting it. We are imperfect creatures who struggle with internal battles on a daily basis, and all the issues and problems that we deal with in our own lives. Whether that's jealousy or resentment or whatever the case may be, gets reflected onto everything that we create, whether that's things that we create in our personal lives or whether that's societal systems that we create. At the end of the day, the world that we've built is basically just a reflection of the collective inner state of the people who built it over the course of generations and generations. And so there's the inherent human nature is greedy. Like if a person has the opportunity to
Yep.
cheat his neighbor, maybe he will. Depends on how well he knows his neighbor. If he
And
has
how
the
much he thinks he
opportunity,
can get away with it.
yeah, what's the likelihood of getting away? What's the potential reward versus the potential cost, etc., etc. You're less likely to cheat your own family, maybe a little less likely to cheat your own friends. But if it's somebody that's on the other side of the country who you've never met, it's a lot easier to cheat that person. And so that inherent sort of tendency is kind of reflected in this money system that we've created. And it's always been a feature of money because it's always been a feature of human nature. It's the same with all the governance structures that we've built. Despite our best attempts, even modern democracies tend to centralize power, because at the end of the day, that's what each and every one of us wants. You're highly unlikely to say no if your friends hand over their whatever to you and it puts you in a position of power over them. It's kind of like a inherent human quality. So I don't know, it's messy, but human nature is messy, and that just is what it is.
Yeah. You are, I mean, being very philosophical, and I've had a look at your website. You're an incredible writer. I saw there that's kind of your journey with meditation. Obviously, the surfing lends itself, or that personality lends itself to the surfing. So maybe that's why. Let's sort of we'll come back to Bitcoin and Bitcoin Ekasi and stuff, but just to talk about that, like the importance of kind of that. And I think by the sounds of things, getting to know you, it kind of goes hand in glove with that freedom, that deep need for freedom inside you. Let's talk about the importance of that meditation, soulfulness, and why it became important to you.
I mean, I think freedom is probably not as well understood as it should be. So freedom in the physical sense it's freedom of movement. So if you're being restrained by some government authority, you're put in prison, obviously you've lost your physical freedom. Financial freedom is being able to afford all the things you want to do. Those freedoms are important, but I think the fundamental freedom is freedom from your own internal demons, whatever they may be. And I think inevitably everybody lives with internal demons. It's part of what creates the human ego. It's this beautiful conundrum that we have, where you cannot survive in the physical world without having a separate sense of identity. You have to see yourself as separate from the world around you in order to keep your physical body alive. If your mind did not understand that you're a separate entity, if your mind was under this illusion that it's all just one big, beautiful field of energy, then why would you feed your body? So you have to have a physical, you have to have a mental ego in order to keep your physical body alive. But at the same time, the formation of this ego, especially in its early stages, causes or is caused by trauma. That is sort of almost by definition what creates the ego. You cannot shape the ego. You cannot create the ego into this thing that has a sense of separateness about itself. You cannot do that without inducing a certain amount of trauma or suffering or whatever you want to use. And so by definition, once the ego grows up, it has this baggage that it carries with it. And there's a certain sense of inevitability to that. And the ultimate aim, as far as I see it, is then to, as an adult, be able to recognize that and work your way through that, so that you can still have, you need this physical, you need this mental identity that's separate from everything else. You cannot survive without it, but ideally you'd like to have that without carrying the baggage that created it. And so it's an internal process of coming to terms with the stuff that shaped you. And that, to me, is the ultimate freedom. And if you don't have that freedom, then whatever other freedoms you may attain, whether it's physical, financial, or whatever the case may be, will probably mean very little. So that to me is kind of like, in a nutshell, what the human condition is essentially all about.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love it. And meditation as well. I mean, do you physically meditate, go on kind of like retreats like that, or is it happen in the ocean? Do you surf a lot? I mean, I'm assuming. I haven't even asked that question. I'm just assuming you do. Do you?
I used to surf every single day when I was a kid.
Okay.
I grew up surfing and kind of fell out of it as a older teenager. Started experimenting a lot with drugs and alcohol, which turned into its own journey. Even today, I still see myself as a recovering addict, but picked up surfing again as an adult. So I surfed that's all I did when I was a kid. I used to go to school only because I had to, but if I didn't have to, I would have surfed every single day, the whole day long. I try and do it as much as I can these days, but I have my own kids now, so I actually spend more time teaching them to surf than I surf myself. But I've got a plan. I'm trying to turn them into proper surfers, so that I've got an excuse to spend more time in the water. Because anybody with kids, anybody with a wife and kids will know, like, when you leave the house and you don't take one of the kids with you, there's this weird, like, what the hell are you doing question hanging in the air. The parent that leaves the house and then leaves the other parent at the house with the kids is always going to be wondering. So my idea is to be able to kill two birds with one stone. If I can teach my kids how to surf, then I can go and do the thing that I love doing, and at the same time not burden my wife with being at home with them. But no, I do surf as often as I can. But it's not, I mean, meditation for me is not, it's not a thing necessarily where you sit down and, you know, I mean, that's probably the most effective form of meditation, where you actually sit down and close your eyes and try to observe your mind. But meditation for me is my, it's my own personal journey and recovery, which is, at the end of the day, it's a journey of learning to come to terms with these demons that cause the internal struggles. It's the baggage of the ego, basically, that you have to work through. The problem with any addict is never the drugs. It's the reason why they resorted to drugs, and that reason is the baggage that they carry. It's the inability to deal with the baggage that drives a person to seek out a form of self-medication, and that's what turns into drug addiction. So that's meditation to me is more that, and there's different ways to do that. I mean, reading certain types of literature can also be meditation. When you're reading, you know, spiritual literature, where it's a different kind of literature, it's a type of meditation. Having a conversation with somebody who's guiding you through that journey, especially if it's a very long-term relationship where, you know, you've been working on this for years and years and years, can also be a type of meditation. I wouldn't say surfing is meditation. That's just fun. But I guess it could be. I don't know.
And I always think about like what it must be like. I mean, I've surfed once, and by surf, I mean go with my son to a surfing lesson and hurt myself falling off a board is kind of my experience. But I always look at it, you know, this sort of romanticized picture of like, you know, you're out on your board and the glistening on the sea and the sun. I've got this like romanticized version of what surfing is. But it's actually quite hard, dragging yourself through water.
It's very hard.
It's like a hell of a physical.
Yeah.
You just think, oh, I'm going to just jump up on this board. It's like, no, you're not.
No, it's very difficult. I mean, it's really difficult. It's the learning curve is incredibly steep.
Yeah.
It's easy to have fun in the beginning, you know, and that's why the two entities that we have, the tour operator that focuses on surf tourism and the surfer kids, that's why it works, because you can hook someone very easily with surfing and get them into it, and they can start having a lot of fun very quickly. But then as soon as you've done it for a couple of weeks and you want to start progressing, the learning curve becomes very, very steep.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a combination between something straightforward like playing soccer and learning to play the violin, where if you throw a ball onto a field and you've got a bunch of kids running after it and they're all trying to kick the ball, I mean, you're basically playing soccer, and you know, it's very quick and very easy to get going, you know, and then at the same time, as soon as you start progressing in that, it becomes more like playing the violin, where progress is excruciatingly slow and you have to work incredibly hard to make the slightest bit of progress. And so it's quite interesting. It's quite interesting in that. And at the same time, the thing that fascinates me the most about surfing is that, you know, at first you learn to stand on the board and ride the wave, then you learn how to paddle, then you learn how to catch your own waves, and then finally the last thing that you learn is you learn to read the ocean. So you got to know where the waves are going to break, and you have to be able to predict in advance where that wave is going to break. So you have to be able to look out into the ocean and you see the swell lines coming towards you, and as you see that swell line coming towards you, they're never the same. There's no two waves that are exactly the same. So you have to position yourself relative to the incoming swell so that you're in the right place to catch it. And it's kind of like learning to read a new language. You kind of understand to, you know, you look for the signals and the signs, and you sort of assimilate that, and then you can put yourself in the right place. But if you can't read the ocean, you're never going to be in the right place. You're never going to be able to catch the right waves. You won't be able to, where to paddle in, where not to paddle in, etc., etc. So that to me is kind of the most interesting part about surfing, is that you're kind of learning this sort of natural language. It's kind of, I mean, it's a sort of a language of the ocean. I mean, I don't want to make it sound all poetic and shit, but you
It's
really
true.
have
I,
to.
I see that. Like your body's got to actually become, and now I'm also going to sound like, but I can understand you sort of almost becoming one with it, because if you're not and you're not experiencing it and seeing it, there is something. I think that's kind of what I meant in the beginning when I said there's something spiritual about it. Maybe it's not meditative, but maybe it feels like it's.
Yeah, definitely. There's that aspect to it. I mean, it's not. I'm not referring to when you're actually riding the wave. I'm talking about when you're trying to get yourself in the right position in order to catch the wave. So if you're sitting way out and you're too deep, you're not going to be able to catch the wave because the swell is not steep enough for you to get into it. Whereas if you're sitting too shallow, the wave will break before it gets to you, and then you've lost the opportunity to actually catch it, because then you're just stuck in the whitewash. You're kind of, and in order to do that, you have to be able to predict where the wave is going to break. It's kind of like it's kind of like learning a language, because you're not, as you're sitting here listening to me, you're not deciphering what I'm saying. Your brain automatically understands what I'm saying. That's why we can have a conversation in real time. If you first had to decipher what I was saying, this conversation would take 10 times longer. And so that's kind of what it's like when you finally learn to surf, and that takes at least 3 to 4 years. I've never seen anyone do it in less time than that. The physical aspects of learning to surf, you can do that in 6 months. Learning to ride the wave, paddle, etc., etc. Those are all just physical muscles. But learning to read the ocean, it's a thing that you have to learn to understand in here. It's like learning a language, basically.
Yeah, magical. Okay, so let's nip back to circular economies. I just want to kind of, I mean, we know what it is, we know what we're talking about, but I think let's talk about Bitcoin Ekasi. Ekasi means township. Is that right?
Yeah, it's an informal, it's a colloquial reference to a South African township, but it could be any township.
Okay, yeah. So it's inspired in many ways by El Salvador and Bitcoin Beach. It is in Mossel Bay. It is Bitcoin Ekasi. And now let's talk about that circular economy. What does it look like on a day-to-day basis, and how it's sort of come along over the last couple of years?
I mean, on a day-to-day basis, we pay salaries once a week. And today we employ like 9-10 people full-time. And so they all work for the charity, for the surfer kids. The surf coaches, lifeguards, there's a financial literacy teacher, there's community support, there's there's media managers, there's but it's still a small team. It's not a massive team at all. It's nine people full time, and then we have a bunch of kids that also work for us, but they earn small stipends. They don't earn full-time salaries at all. I mean, even the full-time salaries we pay are very small salaries. I mean, for the most part, the people who work for us are come from very difficult circumstances. They don't have university degrees, etc. So we don't pay corporate salaries, not at all. If we had to pay corporate salaries, we could probably employ one person, maybe two. But I was just going to say, we pay their salaries once a week, and the staff go out and they buy what they need. That's basically what it is, and they buy what they need using Bitcoin that they earned as a salary, and then from there on, the businesses receive those sats, and then the businesses sometimes use it within and amongst each other. Some of the businesses keep it and save in it. Some of the businesses obviously inevitably cash out. But these days, there are fascinating ways of cashing out. You can use Money Badger to go to Pick and Pay. You can stock up that way. With Scan to Pay, there's hundreds of thousands of locations where you can now cash out. So it's cashing out is not necessarily let me sell my Bitcoin for physical cash and then use the cash to go and buy what I need. Cashing out can be I'm using this service that lets me pay with sats, but the merchant so that's kind of what it looks like. It's very hard to estimate how many people use it on a daily basis, but the number that we've come to is probably more or less somewhere between 400 and 500 people that use it either daily, weekly, or monthly. And most of that is obviously the people that work for us, and then especially the people that work for us full time. Each one of them has about 3 or 4 dependents, and those dependents would obviously also then do whatever they do with Bitcoin, because the main income earner in their household is earning his entire salary on Bitcoin.
That is so fascinating. So it goes, you're basically going into the main breadwinner, and then the dependents have also got their Blink wallets or whichever Lightning wallet they use. So you've got that, and then you've obviously got the vendors, right? So that was going to be a question of mine. It's actually Bitcoin to Bitcoin, Lightning to Lightning. It's not like, there's a difference with, I think Money Badger is incredible. And I'd love to chat to Carl as well. I've asked him to come and chat to us. But there, people do have the option to accept, like you said, accept Bitcoin and then cash it out to Rand. But I chatted to Nick as well. I had Nick Darlington on the show, and he was kind of talking about how it's getting easier and easier through Money Badger for us to spend Bitcoin to pretty much, you could almost live on it, unless your landlord would have to accept Bitcoin. Rent,
you can almost do anything with it. I mean, I paid my municipal bill with Bitcoin today. I filled up my car.
How?
Yeah, you can pay your municipal bill at Pick n Pay and use Money Badger there. I filled up my car with Money Badger at Shell Garage, and I bought some stuff on Takealot for the kids, also using Money Badger. But it's important to understand that Money Badger is selling that Bitcoin. The merchants don't receive Bitcoin, not yet. But the cool thing with what Money Badger is building is that the merchants do eventually have the option to receive Bitcoin rather than fiat. So that's obviously where they're trying to get to. It's not going to be something that happens overnight. So we do distinguish the circular economy as something where you don't use services like Money Badger. If people are going to Pick n Pay to buy something and they see that as part of the circular economy, then they're kind of mistaken, because no, you're not circulating sats. You are selling sats. You are paying with sats, but the merchant is receiving fiat. And between you and the merchant, there's a Bitcoin to fiat conversion that takes place, and so that obviously doesn't qualify itself as part of the circular economy.
That's a semi-circular economy.
It's basically an off ramp. It's an off ramp into the world of fiat, which is very, very important, because it's impossible to onboard somebody to Bitcoin if you don't first. No, not impossible, but it's very difficult to onboard somebody to Bitcoin if you don't first demonstrate that it's easy to do stuff with it. And in today's world, in order to do stuff with Bitcoin, the easiest way to do that is to build something like Money Badger, where you don't have to convince the store owner to accept Bitcoin. You can simply let the person spending the Bitcoin pay with Bitcoin. To them, it looks like a Bitcoin transaction, and to the merchant, it looks like a fiat transaction. That's a very clever way of doing it, but it's an interim solution, and that's not the end goal. The end goal is to have, the end goal is basically to do what we're trying to do at Bitcoin Ekasi, where you're spending Bitcoin and the person is receiving Bitcoin, and that person is spending Bitcoin, and whoever they're paying are receiving Bitcoin, and that person is receiving Bitcoin, and whoever they are paying are receiving Bitcoin. So if one of our coaches has to go and buy groceries, the spaza shop receives Bitcoin in exchange for the bread and milk, and then the spaza shop takes those sats and they go wash their car, and the car wash receives Bitcoin in exchange for that. And then the car wash owner wants to go get his hair cut, and he pays for the haircut with sats, and the barbershop receives Bitcoin. Nowhere in that equation is there any fiat. That's a circular economy. You're trying to circulate sats. Money Badger is an off-ramp out of that into the fiat world. It's very, very useful. It's very important. I don't think we'd be able to do what we do if it wasn't for Money Badger. I want to be absolutely clear about that. But even Money Badger would tell you that what they're building in its current state is not the end goal. The end goal is for the person who makes the payment in Bitcoin to send the Bitcoin to the person receiving the Bitcoin, and there must be no fiat in that equation. That's the end goal, which is not currently the case. Pick n Pay does not receive Bitcoin. It'd be great if they did, and hopefully they do. And that might happen sooner than we think. I don't know.
Now, 2 questions. How does, and it's something I just simply, I don't actually understand, and I kind of go back and forward about it. How does it work when you are in this circular economy and you are being paid in Bitcoin and you are spending that on? And I hope this doesn't sound stupid, but I have honestly thought about it so many times, and I still think about it. The volatility of Bitcoin, and I just mean that in terms of, because I get asked that. I try and onboard all my mom friends when we were using Moon at Pick n Pay, and I'd be like, "This is the best thing ever. You can, pay at Pick n Pay," and they were like, "Yeah, but I don't want to spend 10 Rand on bread today, and it's only 9 Rand tomorrow." How does one, I'm asking you so that I can share that knowledge on, because I never know what to say to people in response to that.
I mean,
you just have to suck it up.
I think the answer to that question, from my perspective, is that you're going to have a very hard time getting someone to spend Bitcoin if the majority of their life is still denominated in fiat or lived in fiat. If you're buying Bitcoin as an investment, that's great. That's fantastic. You should definitely do that. But if Bitcoin is like a 5% allocation for you, it makes no sense to go out and spend some of your Bitcoin. If you really believe in the mission, you could spend and replace. And so what you could do is, if you decide, okay, I'm going to buy, 5,000 Rand worth of Bitcoin every month, let's say, that's 10% of my monthly salary. I want to put 10% of my monthly salary into Bitcoin as an investment, but I'm going to add 1% to that. So I'm going to buy 6% of my salary, convert that into Bitcoin every month. And then I'm going to spend 1% of that, because I would have spent that in fiat anyway. But that's kind of clunky, and you really have to believe in the mission to want to do that. Somebody who's just, sort of allocating some money to Bitcoin because they believe that it's going to appreciate in value, it's unlikely. But if your entire life is denominated in Bitcoin, so if your entire salary is paid in Bitcoin, you have no choice but to go and spend it. Those questions become kind of irrelevant. Like if you, and that's what we've built. We don't pay any salaries in fiat, and so the coaches, volatility is an issue, but it's something that we have to deal with. And obviously, we're doing it for the sake of adoption. We're doing it because we're building an example of where we want to see the world go. But there's ways and means to deal with volatility. Blink has this built-in stable SAS feature, for example. You don't even have to touch stable coins. Blink does that through quite a complicated structure on the back end, but the bottom line is you get to avoid the volatility of Bitcoin while still using a everyday Bitcoin wallet. So there's ways and means around the volatility, and we use those things. But the point is, it's a completely, I also didn't really spend any of my Bitcoin until the vast majority of my income switched from fiat to Bitcoin, and that sort of happened in 2022 when when the sanctions in our tourism business became almost complete. So sanctions were first introduced in 2014.
What
We
do you mean
started getting.
sanctions were introduced? And sorry to interrupt you, but you said that earlier. What do you mean sanctions were introduced in your industry in tourism?
So we work with the Russian market mostly. The vast majority, well, not basically 100% of our clientele are Russian.
Okay.
So we sell South Africa as a destination in the Russian market. My wife was one of the first, not the first, but one of the first Russian tour guides in South Africa. When we started, South Africa was almost completely unheard of as a destination in the Russian market. South Africa itself was a very well-developed tourism destination by 2010, obviously.
Yeah.
But in the Russian market, it was completely unheard of. People were like, where is South Africa? What is that? And so we kind of tapped into that, and we started selling South Africa as a destination. Today, Russian tourism in South Africa is hugely popular. You'll hear Russian almost anywhere you go in Cape Town. But when we started, that was not at all the case.
Wow.
When
Interesting.
when we started, we'd show up at a hotel, and the people were like, "Oh, we've never seen Russians in our life." Today it's like hearing somebody speak German or French.
Yeah.
It's like, oh well,
Yeah.
there's another Russian. It's completely changed in the last 15 years. But anyway, when Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, we'd been operating for 4 years by then, and partial sanctions were introduced then. Our first clients to pay in Bitcoin were from Ukraine, but they banked in Russia, so they were cut off from their financial services and couldn't pay us. And so that's when we first started using Bitcoin. And then in 2022, when the war escalated, with the full-on invasion of Ukraine by Russia, the sanctions were complete, basically. So the US kicked Russia off of the SWIFT system. SWIFT being the dominant way for banks to settle international transactions. And when that happened, we'd been accepting Bitcoin payments for years, so it was very easy for us to just switch over and say, well, you guys can pay us in Bitcoin now. So our Bitcoin payments went from probably below 5% of our total turnover to well over 70% of our total turnover during the course. Yeah. So and that's when I really started spending Bitcoin as well, because now all of a sudden most of what I earned is coming in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So what am I going to do? Am I going to, if everything I own or earn on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis is in Bitcoin, am I going to go out and sell that Bitcoin before I spend it to buy myself groceries for the month? Or am I just going to use the Bitcoin without selling it to buy myself groceries? The answer is quite obvious. And I think that's where the problem lies with getting people to spend Bitcoin, is you can't expect them to spend Bitcoin if it's like a small allocation for them. It doesn't really make sense.
You know what I think you've again, you're on the money. You've hit the nail on the head, is that it really comes down to earning Bitcoin.
Yeah,
because
that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. So the more we can kind of start paying that forward and opening up opportunities where people can actually earn Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Then it's like, because I mean, we know as South Africans, you don't want to earn rand and then go on a holiday in London, because you're not going to get very far.
That's exactly what you just said right there. The trick is not to get people to spend Bitcoin. The trick is to get people to earn it. Yes. And then once you're earning Bitcoin, the spending will happen. The spending will happen naturally. There's probably, I can't say anything about it, but thanks to companies like Blink and Money Badger, there's going to be very interesting things happening in the next year or so, and hopefully we'll have one of these things ready to be spoken about at the next conference in Cape Town next year, where that's the thing that we have to crack. We've got to figure out how do we get people to earn Bitcoin, and then the spending side kind of resolves itself. But it's a bit of a chicken and an egg problem. but if not if you're earning in Bitcoin. If you're earning in Bitcoin, then it's not a chicken and egg problem. And there's many reasons why you'd want to earn in Bitcoin. It solves many of those issues. It was a very, very practical choice for us, and I think it could be for many other people.
Listen, if I could, I would in a heartbeat. I mean, I don't, none of this. I had a grant that started the show off. And to me, that I kind of just look at it and I think I'm earning money for my future self. I've been fortunate just to be able to leave it there every now and then. Like I said, I've used it to buy groceries and stuff. But yeah. So now, I see we've come up to the hour. Just kind of, where do you see? I mean, there's this beautiful thing that always makes me think of throwing pebbles in a water with circular economies. Every time I hear that word, that's what I think. And I think at the conference when I was at dinner, I was talking to somebody else. Can't remember his name now. The guy who was taking the photographs, and he's also involved with a circular economy. And he was saying they're popping up. There's a lot more than you actually realize or that you see on social media or that you can follow. And eventually I kind of imagine then because this is actually a question, but do they all then kind of start joining together? So you kind of create these little hubs everywhere, and then is that how it sort of expands out and out? Is that?
I mean, if you're talking about mass adoption, then I think companies like Money Badger, and I keep on using the Money Badger example, but they're not the only example. They are the logical next step. So what's interesting, in the US, there's actually a great example of this, kind of where we started the conversation with the difference between the two. There's one should look at the US for examples because they are pretty good at building stuff. And so there's this company called Steak and Shake that started accepting Bitcoin payments a while back. I bought myself a burger and a milkshake in Las Vegas at one of their branches where you could pay with Bitcoin. And the company actually receives Bitcoin, so it's not being converted to fiat. And they started paying some of their employees a portion of their salary in Bitcoin, and that's where we want to go. We want companies to start accepting Bitcoin payments, like let's say Money Badger. Because there is a company in Cape Town called Butler's Pizza that also accepts Bitcoin payments through Money Badger, but they actually receive the Bitcoin. So Money Badger does not convert. This could have changed since the last time I spoke to Carl, but at least this was the case when last I spoke to him about this. Money Badger does not convert the Bitcoin to fiat before sending it to Butler's Pizza. Butler's Pizza receives the Bitcoin. Now, if Butler's Pizza starts paying some of their employees in Bitcoin, there's the beginning of something that it's not a little small circular economy like what we're building in Mossel Bay. It's something much bigger than that. And Butler's Pizza is a small company, but what if Pick n Pay starts doing that? What if Pick n Pay starts, tells Money Badger, look guys, let's not convert 100% of the Bitcoin sales. Let's take part of that in Bitcoin. And I mean, the Bitcoin turnover at Pick n Pay is a small part of their overall turnover, so it shouldn't be such a daunting decision for them to make. And what if they start paying some bonuses in Bitcoin to their employees?
That should be an option. I mean, imagine you had the option. If they gave that, just all they had to do really was give the option to their employees and say, look, if you'd like 1%, 2%, 5% of your salary. I wonder if it's just like a paperwork nightmare, probably.
I have no idea, yeah. And I don't know if that's gonna happen. But what I'm saying is that I think that's the next step. I don't think one can expect. It's very, very, very labor intensive to build one of these small circular economies the way it was done in Witstrand or in Plet or in Bitcoin Ekasi where we are. It's very labor intensive. It's a very inefficient way. It's a very inefficient way to try and onboard hundreds of thousands of people. But it is a very good proof of concept. It is a very good project to have that you can point to. It is a very good place to go and visit so that you can see this is where we want to go. But in order to onboard hundreds of thousands of people, you need something that scales. And that scale, I don't think if you're going to onboard half of South Africa by building circular economies, you're going to have to build 10,000 Bitcoin circular economies. And I don't think we're going to see 10,000 Bitcoin circular economies like Bitcoin Ekasi anytime soon or ever in South Africa. But what we can see is we can see companies like Money Badger onboarding massive corporations, and that's really not such a big hassle. I mean, obviously it's a lot of hard work, but relative to the number of people that you onboard, it's not such a big hassle. You know, they switched on Bitcoin payments at more than 1,000 Pick n Pay locations, basically by flipping a switch. That's oversimplifying it. Obviously, there was a lot of testing involved and a lot of building in the background. But once the whole thing had been built and tested, you know, one day you could spend Bitcoin at 3 Pick n Pays nationwide. The next day you could spend Bitcoin at, you know, 1,600 locations nationwide. And I've never walked into a Pick n Pay anywhere in South Africa where my Bitcoin payment has failed. And so that's scalability. So I think I don't think we're going to see, you know, hundreds or thousands of small circular economies. The number that we see right now is probably the number that we need just to serve as examples, proof of concepts. But now what I'd like to see is to see the Money Badger type companies evolve out of these circular economies. Like what types of products and services that are based on Bitcoin can we build that is inspired by this idea of making Bitcoin everyday money?
I love it. I love those points. I love talking about earning it. And I love the idea of, which you mentioned earlier, which has stuck with me, is just a little bit of your salary, you know, just even if it's just your bonus, or the choice to say, okay, I'm going to dip my toe in, and just, because I guess that's how it starts. That's that first little pebble in that you go, okay, now we've got 10 people taking 1%. Now we've got 20 people taking 2%, and so on and so on. Because I think that is the biggest thing that I come up against with everybody, is just the fear of the unknown. It's actually not really even the fear of Bitcoin. It's the fear of, okay, how do I get it in and out? Is it real money? You know, and, you know, so I think it's that, just giving people, when I spoke to Oken the other day, I loved what he did. He had this event where people would pay in Namibian dollars for their ticket, and then when they got there, they could get half of their ticket back if they downloaded a Lightning wallet in Bitcoin. And I thought, that's so smart as well. There's lots of little interesting things popping up, you know, of ways to start doing that, just getting that first wallet and that first bit of Bitcoin, you know.
I mean, and again, I keep on talking about Money Badger, but again, a company like Money Badger could, for example, say, well, if you receive fiat payments, we can settle in Bitcoin. So do it the other way around. You know, rather than let people pay in Bitcoin and you receive fiat, why don't you convert your fiat payments to Bitcoin? Things like that. You know, there's all kinds of things that can be built. And I mean, these days with AI, we saw a circular economy builder build an incredible thing with AI. This guy's not a developer, he's not a coder. He just started asking Claude questions, and he ended up building this incredible thing that it just blew my mind. And, you know, the idea came out of wanting to build circular economies, but the thing that he built, we don't have time to go into detail of what that is, but the thing that he built goes way beyond just Bitcoin circular economies. And so this is the thing I think that we might end up seeing, is that we'll see companies that look at circular economies and go, well, okay, let's try and scale this. And then they build something that's inspired by a Bitcoin circular economy, but it goes way beyond the Bitcoin circular economy. And that's how we could potentially see hundreds of thousands of people get on board.
Yes, I'm seeing it now. I'm seeing, it's just, I've loved this conversation, because even it could go as far as like your company cafeteria. You know, it's as simple as that. It's like everybody, you can give in 200 Rand a month, and the company takes all that, and you get your Bitcoin, and you start spending your Bitcoin on your lunch, because you were going to eat it anyway. You know, it's not like you were buying furniture, you know, it's food anyway. So I guess so. I see it now. It's just that beautiful little example of, okay, try and think of ways. And I think that's the message that I would love to stay with everybody is, even if it's just between 5 of you or 10 of you, try and think of a way on how you can start circulating your sats to build these things, because we could build it in many, many ways, even amongst friends. We could.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think it's I think that's one of the most important motivating factors for me to build circular economies, is to inspire people to think that way. I'm very optimistic about the future, but it's kind of conditional upon the fact that Bitcoin becomes widely adopted. If Bitcoin doesn't become widely adopted, I'm definitely a little less optimistic about the future. But I just don't see how Bitcoin becomes widely adopted unless we take some inspiration, not all of the inspiration, but at least some inspiration from what circular economies are doing.
Amazing. And on that note, we've gone over the hour beautifully. I've loved it. I could speak to you. You just started me on like AI now, and I was like, what has he built? No, we'll have to do that another time. I just want to shout out, when I was trying to see if it was going out on Twitter, I actually saw Louis Noel. Remember, he spoke about the 472 million scam, whatever. He was on the show, and I just saw you tweeted that you look so different without your beard and your hat. So that's why I didn't recognize you anyway. So hi, Louis. Thanks for watching. All right, Hermann. Well, it's been incredible talking to you. I think what you're building is just extraordinary, and I'm definitely following it every day, and hopefully just seeing more and more of it happen in tiny ways. It doesn't have to be exactly what you've done, but like we said, even if it's in your company cafeteria and you want to say, okay, we're going to have people somehow spending it in that way, because it's really the only way Bitcoin can move forward. It can't be a vault. It can't just sit still. We need to keep it moving. So yeah. All right, amazing. Well, enjoy the rest of your evening. And again, thank you for joining me and for talking to me, and to everybody watching, thank you very much for tuning in. Again, we are here every single Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern. And today we've been talking about circular economies with a focus on Bitcoin Ekasi in Mossel Bay in Cape Town. Go check it out. Follow Hermann on X. It is Frey Boken O. On X. And yeah, that's me. Just remember that none of this is financial advice. Please do your own research, and do a lot of research. Find out more about Bitcoin. Have a beautiful week, and I'll see you next week. Cheers.
Bye-bye. Thank you.